How are we doing? Good evening. Thank you. Oh, so nice. Thank you for coming tonight. Welcome to the Nasher Museum. We're here to discuss and reflect upon and celebrate our 20th anniversary, which is somewhat hard to imagine. A lot of people in this room have contributed a lot to this conversation and building of this institution, and I'm really pleased to see everyone who's here right now. Just want to say that we have collectively been working towards this moment for a long time. This is a moment to actually celebrate. If you go through the 3 exhibition galleries, they are all collection at this moment, which is unusual for us. But it's a moment to actually reflect upon what we've built. So Shusha Rodriguez in the front row here has organized one of the 3 shows, and then Ellen Raymond and Marshall Price, who are not with us at the moment, organized an amazing photography show. And then there's also a remarkable show where we collaborated with one of our faculty, Courtney Lewis, in a Native American pop show in Wilson Pavilion, in Pavilion 3 across the way. It is also, we're leading up to October 18th, which is going to be the moment we actually celebrate together. We're going to have a full day of celebration, culminating with the performance with DJ Ninth Wonder, but we'll have all sorts of events all throughout the day. We will be opening the sculpture garden, what you're seeing, the construction that's been ongoing for quite a long time, which is the vision of a great number of people predating me, getting to see that vision through. We're super excited by that and what it will hold in the future. But I want to just very briefly introduce our colleague and good friend, mentor in many ways, and a pleasure to introduce Rick Powell to all of you. I'm not going to go on at length. Just hearing him talk tonight is the treat. He's been a collaborator, a partner, and a great scholar here at Duke for a long time. He curated a show at the Nasher when it first opened with his students on Romare Bearden, and the very first when the museum opened, and then in 2014 organized an amazing Archibald Motley show. And if you didn't see it here, you may have seen it at the Whitney, you may have seen it in Chicago, you may have seen it in Los Angeles. It's a great pleasure to be able to speak with you tonight, Rick. I will not go into all details of Rick's illustrious career, but he is definitely recognized as one of the foremost, if not the foremost, scholars of Black art in the country. And so to have him here at Duke for such a long time in partnership has been remarkable. Just to name, he's also a very, very accomplished curator, which you may not know as well because you got to be in that space to see those shows. So in addition to that Archibald Motley show in 2014, shows like The Blues Aesthetic, Rhapsodies in Black, To Conserve a Legacy, and then one of my favorites, Back to Black, which is at Whitechapel in London, which I saw before I even met Rick. So on that note, Rick, why don't you come up and we'll have a little conversation. So we're thinking of this as a 20th anniversary talk, so there's not like a clear format, right? Rick has a wealth of knowledge. You came here to Duke around 89 or 90?
Actually, we arrived January 1990.
January 1990. So I arrived here in 2006. Kim Rorschach, who's in front of me, our founding director, hired me, she and Sarah Schroth. So I've been here for 19 years, but Rick already predated me by, I can't even do the math, is that 16 years? So you've experienced a lot at Duke in leading up to actually the establishment of this museum. And we've got a great slideshow in the back that's just going to rotate some great memories with all the people we've collaborated with, artists and curators and scholars and colleagues. But what can you start us off with about what was the feeling like in sort of leading up to the establishment of the museum?
Well, first of all, thank you for inviting me to be a part of this conversation this evening. It's a real honor. When I think about the Nasher Museum of Art at Duke University, the historian in me travels several years back. And it goes back to the early 1980s when I was a student at Yale University, and I got called into my dissertation advisor's office. Robert Ferris Thompson, amazing scholar of African art and arts of the African diaspora. And he said that he had gotten a call from a former colleague of his who was at the Duke University Museum of Art, named John Spencer, who needed someone to come in and do an evaluation of the African collections. This was the early 80s, so this is like 82 or 83. I had never been in this part of the world before. And I remember flying in from New York. I remember being picked up. I remember the smell of tobacco going down Main Street. It was a very unusual experience for me. And I remember going to this building on East Campus and going through the collections, but also talking to Dr. Spencer, Professor Spencer, and realizing that there had been this really interesting history here at Duke University in terms of wanting to promote and celebrate the arts. It wasn't until some years later when I got an invitation to join the faculty here at Duke University that I realized that the 80s was this kind of hotbed moment for the humanities and arts at Duke University, that all throughout that decade, the various presidents and deans were bringing in incredible people like my colleague Christine Stiles, who joined. She was here before I got here. And, but they were also bringing in all these other literary people, like, the literature program was created during that time period. So the arts and humanities, there was this engine and this excitement. And the one thing that was missing was a for real, originally conceived art museum. And I had no idea that when I got here in 1990, that a decade later, that it would be more than a dream. It would actually be something in the making.
So we know the name of the museum, the Nasher Museum, Ray Nasher being the founder. And that's sort of the story, the public origin story. But obviously, prior to that, someone here had to light the spark to join him in that conversation in the administration. Was that Nan Cohen?
Yeah,
others?
There are lots of guardian angels for the arts at Duke. And the one who you always have to start off with is Mary Duke Biddle Trent Siemens. You're going to get anecdotes tonight. I remember taking my mother to Foster's. This was in the 90s. And she was visiting from Chicago, and Mary was there. And Mary pulled my mother aside and said, "We like this one. He's really a team player, and we're so delighted to have him here with us." And my mother has never forgotten, that gesture that she made, to her. And as so many of you know who've been around, I mean, she was this force of nature in her small diminutive way, and had been preaching and proselytizing for the arts for the longest, not just at Duke, but all throughout North Carolina with the School for the Arts. And so I don't think we would be here without that person, who was, constantly, proselytizing and saying, for Duke to be a first-rate institution, it has to support the arts. And there are all sorts of interesting guardian angels. And somebody I never met who was also one of those early people was Nancy Hanks. And I don't know if any of you know her name. She was the second director of the National Endowment for the Arts. This was in the 1970s. And she was a graduate of Duke. And she was very involved. What made her extraordinary was that she was able to navigate the madness of Washington, D.C., at a time when, it seems like it's always mad, but it was really mad in that time period. And she was appointed the director of the National Endowment for the Arts by Richard Nixon, another Duke graduate. I mean, Duke has got his handprints all over the place. But she was also a really close friend of Richard Hunt, the sculptor, and he would tell me wonderful stories about his conversations with Nancy Hanks. And Nancy Hanks was the person who brought John Spencer into the story of Duke University. He was kind of her right-hand man with the endowment, and he was connected to Duke in those early years. And of course, the other person that you mentioned that we wouldn't even be here had it not been for Nan Cohen, who comes on as president in 1993. And she and Raymond Nasher tell the board, you know, if Duke is going to be first rate, if Duke's going to be at the top of the apex, we need a real university art museum. And it would not have happened had it not been Ray and Nan telling the board, you know, get your act together and make this happen.
So Rick, with those guardian angels, as you call them, those advocates in the community and in the administration, what was it like as a faculty member? What were the expectations or hopes and desires from the faculty and what a museum could be?
Well, I think our faculty is pretty well versed in the world of museums and galleries and interactions with artists, past and present. And so I think that, I'm going back to the early years, I think there was always the understanding that, at least when I arrived here in 1990, that we would do the best that we could to educate students as to the importance of the visual in their lives, in their intellectual growth. I'll just say that when we shifted from the Department of Art and Art History to the Department of Art History, and Visual Studies, we threw down the gauntlet and said that, you know, for you to be an educated person coming out of Duke University, you need to not only know how to make art, not only how to deal with the history, but how to theorize and contemplate what the visual might mean. And so we've always had faculty who were always kind of doing that and pushing that and prodding. And I think there was also the component of our faculty who, again, reminded the administration that the museum would have to be a priority. We would have to have a place, a real place, where we could engage with art, where we could bring our students, where we could also engage with the community, because as you know so well, the Nasher is important not just for Duke University, it's important for Durham, it's important for North Carolina, it's important for the Southeast. And we were able to fill, you know, a really important gap when this building came into existence.
Yeah, so, you know, I know what it was like when I arrived in 2006, and some of the expectations at that time from the Durham community, from Duke. I'm curious, like, even leading up prior, so like, you know, the groundbreaking photo we saw before the doors opened, like, what was the feeling like from your colleagues and your peers? I mean, you're a Durham resident, you live nearby. What was that feeling like?
Just excitement that something was about to happen. Anybody who's been in Durham as long as I have, we've seen this transformation in this community. I mentioned, you know, arriving in the early '80s and going down Main Street. And I talked to my neighbors, and they would tell me about the limited number of places to eat then, way back when. And but all throughout this time period in the '90s, Durham is growing, and people are moving here, and restaurants are opening, and art galleries are appearing. And so culture is really kind of bubbling. I mean, I have amazing memories of the whole area that's now all well built in downtown Durham, near the tobacco factories and the warehouses. That used to be kind of an underground grungy place in the 1990s. I had a colleague, Vernon Pratt, who had a loft down in downtown Durham, and he was like one of those pioneers of trying to get this excitement rolling, and then before we know it, by the end of the 1990s, it's become a destination. No one can afford Durham anymore because of these changes, and the Nashers, I think, are part of that story of blossoming and flourishing. And universities are places that hopefully ideally attract interesting people, intellectuals, as well as creative people and entrepreneurs and what have you. And so by the time the museum really comes into its own, at the beginning of the 21st century, it already has a kind of a frame in which it can sit and be viewed.
And so if we also look at the images before, you see a picture of Raphael Vignoli, the Uruguayan architect who designed this, was really, my understanding, hand-selected by Ray Nasher primarily.
And you have to just give Ray credit, because when it came time to figure out this building and who would design it, I mean, Ray Nasher, this extraordinarily successful builder of shopping malls in Dallas, a very educated and erudite gentleman born in Boston, and very savvy businessman. He knew that if he wanted to make sure that he could do this in a very reasonably, economically reasonable way. And he could have gone with some big named architects who would have charged us gazillions of money. But he chose this up and coming Uruguayan, architect who had just done some big projects for Princeton, but had never built a museum before. And we got this jewel right here, in the middle of campus. And of course, anybody who's been to Cleveland sees that after he did the Nasher, he just turned Cleveland, Ohio out with this extraordinary contemporary space that holds their historical objects and their contemporary pieces. So in many ways, we launched the career of that extraordinary architect. And Ray chose him to be the person, the purveyor of this.
Yeah, I love that insight that you provided, because in some ways that's what we have collectively done as a team with everyone here, is sort of worked with artists, architects, whoever that might be, before their moment has really occurred, and being ahead of the curve in that way.
We talked about
both economical and
We talked about this earlier, Trevor, how being in the orbit of the Nasher, it has never ceased to amaze me how our board members, how our curators have scoped out and have identified up-and-coming artists before they get to be too expensive, before it becomes impossible to acquire their works, before they really make a big name for themselves. But we're fortunate to bring them in to our collection, and so we have these extraordinary works by Nina Chanel Abney or William Cordova or Wangeshi Mutu, and we got them at that right moment, and so we've just been very lucky in that regard. And I mentioned the board members. The other thing that's so extraordinary about the Nasher is that it comes into its existence at the beginning of the 21st century. And if one thinks about the art world in 2000 and beyond, there was a big shift. There was a major shift that goes on in New York and Paris, in all over the world. And all of a sudden, contemporary art becomes the thing to acquire. And we were just so lucky to kind of come into our own at that moment. We didn't have to do what Princeton does or Harvard does or Yale does. They've been around for hundreds of years, and so they've got a lot of things that they're carrying on their backs. but we were able to kind of come into our own at a very auspicious moment with a board that was also very plugged in with what was happening at that moment. And that's why the gallery that Shusha has so beautifully curated, you see just, the genius in buying that which hasn't quite yet, been signed off on by the powers that be, but a good curator and an excellent board can see the potential.
Yeah, let's talk about the board for a little bit more. So when I got here in 2006, under Kim's leadership, I see Michael sitting here, Michael Marsicano, Christine Stiles. You were both on the board in a very particular way, and we had Paula Cooper, of course Ray Nasher, Nancy Nasher, and David Hemmesager, Jason Rubel.
Derek Wilson,
Jacques Reynolds, the director of the Yale University Galleries. It was a powerhouse board from day one.
Michael Levine.
Mike Levine came in shortly thereafter. Yeah. And that having a board like that when arriving is both a little intimidating as a young curator, but also so empowering when they say, yeah, let's do it. And to have that kind of voice behind you and support behind you. How did you, what was it like? Who actually invited you to join? What was that process like in joining the board before the museum even opened?
Well, Kim is guilty of bringing in me and faculty who were clearly engaged and interested in the success of the museum and had real good rapprochement with the various board members. I want to just pause on Paula Cooper, though, because Paula Cooper is very different than that whole roll call that we just gave you of up-and-coming young curators. This is someone who had been in the art world for years and years and years. And I was so fascinated that she had decided to be committed to helping the Nasher come into its own. And as I told you, she has a place in my galaxy for the gift that she gave us of about 3 or 4 amazing little paintings by Bob Thompson. This important, extraordinary, very, very important African-American artist who worked in the late 50s, early 60s in Rome and New York City and Provincetown. And she gave us some gems of his work. And so she can do no wrong in my book, because that was a gift that keeps on giving.
Yeah, that's a remarkable gift. There are certainly works that we probably would not have come across otherwise, at least to this point. And we've had, I'll just say we've had such generous donors and support. As you know, we're part of Duke University, right? But when you open a museum and Kim opened, our budget was significantly less than it is now. We still complain that we don't have enough, to acquire works. But there's been, whether our board members or others stepping up, I'm looking at Christine right in front of us, and we've got the Sherman Fleming show on view right now. From her generosity also works in the other, there's so many people have contributed to this and stepped up, not just with works that they're most interested in, but realizing what our curatorial team had identified, it might be useful for us, might be interesting to us. What are the gaps that we could fill? Is there anything?
There was that great picture, you all have seen it, of Kehinde Wiley standing in front of one of his amazing paintings, where he has been in conversation with somebody in Harlem and has brought them into his studio, and he has them posing as an old master, painting from France or England. The person who made that happen for us, the gift, was Blake Byrne, who was another incredible, wonderful, generous, kind, fun, board member. Yeah.
All those things, and boisterous, and supportive. And a lot of fun. Yeah. A lot of fun. In fact, his name was invoked this morning in a conversation. it makes me think of like what it means to actually be at a university art museum. And my wife Tika and I moved from New York here in 2006. And for me, the lure was being part of something new. It was a startup museum, essentially. I mean, there was the Duke University Museum of Art, but something so fresh. And I'm from North Carolina, so do something at home, right? That to try and be a part of doing what had the luxury of doing in New York here in North Carolina. But I had worked in galleries in New York, and I can tell you that at that time in the early 2000s, university art museums were not seen as really heavily involved with contemporary art, much more involved with historical art. And to try and make that leap obviously takes a lot of support from your directors and your board. But what can you speak to in that?
I was just going to add that not only was the profile of the University Museum totally transformed by the Nasher Museum of Art, but what also made the Nasher Museum of Art and what makes it stand out is that it is in conversation with MoMA. It is in conversation with the Whitney. It is in conversation with the Art Institute of Chicago. In other words, these are old, big, established, major municipal museums that are taking our shows. They're talking to our curators. They are borrowing the objects that we acquired that they're putting in their big, big shows, in New York and LA and Chicago. So the Nasher just kind of broke the mold of the University Museum as not this stodgy, very conservative place that's not in conversation with this larger world of art and thinking. And the other thing about university museums, particularly thinking about these other institutions, is that university museums are not afraid. They're fearless in terms of exhibiting and showing work and exploring ideas that big museums sometimes just get cold feet on.
Yeah, yes. That I don't want to speak too much to that. Although some of our shows, and we have collaborated with a lot of these institutions, and Lynn works out to them, and we've got a crackerjack curatorial staff. There's shows that we've done, and we've spoken with colleagues at major museums in New York and said, "I'm so happy you did that. We could not have done it because our board didn't know who that artist was or didn't know anything about that concept, and I could have never gotten it past them." So to be able to originate it here and then take it back to New York or take it to Los Angeles or take it to Chicago or take it to London is very unusual. It's not so unusual today, but very unusual what our team has done.
And part of the salesmanship of the Nasher is that when you come here from New York or LA or Chicago and you walk into the galleries and you see what this little engine that could does in terms of incredible installations. I'm looking at Kim and thinking about that early show of Yves Sussman that took up a whole huge space. I mean, I had never seen anything so beautifully installed as that. And we've been really blessed with incredible preparators who do more than just kind of hang things up on the wall. They are collaborators with the curators and the artists to think about, how can this best be seen? And again, we give props to Raphael Vignoli for having created these pavilions that really lend themselves to experimentation and fun. But we have also great staff who really know how to install and make things look really, really good.
We do. I think it's pretty common when we take a traveling show from elsewhere and then their curators or the artist comes here, they frequently say, "Wow, that's the best that show's ever looked. It looks better than when we originated it."
I'm thinking when Barclay Hendricks was up, and I think you were talking to Thelma, and she says, "We can't make it, but we'll take it," because she saw how fabulous it looked, in our galleries.
That was her quote.
Okay.
Yeah, it also just makes me think of what it means to travel shows and as an ambassador for not just the museum but for Duke as a university, for Durham, what it means for a university art museum in Durham, North Carolina to travel a show to the places we've talked about, to the institutions we've talked about, or even just loan out a work, because we have a work that is valued in such a way where Kerry James Marshall has a massive show at the Royal Academy that just opened in London, and they needed our work for that. Rick, you organized an amazing Archibald Motley show in 2014. And we started it here. We collaborated with Rick to help him fulfill his vision. And that was one of the opening shows. When the Whitney's new, it's not new now, when they opened their new space downtown, that was one of their opening shows. From little old, Nasher Museum in Durham, North Carolina. And to be able to work with you on that and help bring part of what we have executed to the world is special.
Well, and I got to give you credit, Trevor, for having those connections and those relationships with curators and galleries in New York for them to even think that there might be something here worth checking out. I mean, you and Sarah Schroth and Kim have always been, in conversation with the world. And having a university museum that's not insular, but rather, in conversation with what's happening in other places, really helps. And that's why the Motley Show got to the Whitney, actually.
Yeah. It always takes relationships. It's always about having a past, perhaps, with someone or a relationship where they trust you. Because when you send out a show, as you know, it's rare that they have seen the final product. Like, they have to believe in, okay, Shusha Rodriguez or Marshall Price have organized this show, so I believe in that product. It's not that they get to come view it and then, we'll take it later. It's too late by that point. So it's about the trust that you've built over a period of time with these colleagues, for sure.
No, that was a really fun experience. And I think I had mentioned to you one of the pièces de résistance for me was when we ended up, we were trying to borrow a couple of really amazing works from a major collector who refused. But that didn't deter me. And so what we ended up doing is getting Charles Stone III, the amazing filmmaker, to go to the collector and photograph and film the paintings by Motley. And then he created this remarkable film. But I forgot to mention that he included myself and several of our consultants on that project in the film, and he shot us at Columbia College in Chicago. And lo and behold, we walk into this office at Columbia College, and the cinematographer is Arthur Jaffa, the most important major cinematographer, artist working right now. And I'll never forget, he opened the window so that the light coming in from Lake Michigan would light us, And then Chuck and AJ told me that after they shot us, they ended up going to Chicago to watch step dancing and try to incorporate some of that into the film to resonate with the Motley works from the 1920s and 30s. So I love that moment. I really did.
Yeah, that was a brilliant way to bring that work to life. And if anyone doesn't know Charles Stone, you probably, if you're old enough to know the Budweiser commercial, "What's up?" That's also Charles Stone.
And you
he's
might
worked
know
at
him,
many levels.
And you might know him from all of his collaborations with The Roots.
Yeah.
Really, really great music videos. They go beyond music videos. They're really little films.
I want to also just stay with Motley for a moment, because that's not a contemporary art show, right? So we're not just working with traveling contemporary art shows. It's a historical show. It's an artist who had been grossly overlooked that you helped bring back into the spotlight. It's also a project where you not only had the vision and the research to pull it together, but also the relationship, right? There's an important relationship there at the estate and with the family.
Yes, that was it was a charmed moment, and I had known Archibald Motley's son for years. He was a an archivist at the Chicago Historical Society. Chicago History Museum is what it's now called. And so I knew him for years. And actually, when I was working on my dissertation, or actually was when I was working on my master's thesis, I had reached out to Archie, the son, about interviewing Archibald. And within a couple of months, Archibald Motley had died. So I missed that opportunity, but we remained in touch with one another, Archie and myself. And then he passed, and I became very close to his widow, Valerie. And she's the reason why we were able to assemble all those incredible pieces. Yeah.
And after that show, if I can just, give you more props, a work comes into the Nasher collection because of that work and that relationship that Rick ignited. Also, the Whitney acquires a work right afterwards. Other museums start to acquire works that had not been paying attention.
Well, let me throw this back at you. So, let's talk about Barclay Hendricks. When we exhibit him, and that show travels to the Studio Museum in Harlem, this is an artist who was really one of the very important figures of figurative painting in the latter part of the 20th century. And it was after our incredible exhibit that these works suddenly just kind of shoot up in price. They become basically prohibitive for anyone. And again, because of our relationship with Barclay and Susan, we have in the show that Susan has all brilliantly curated some amazing pieces that are just kind of they're at the top of the quality. Hey, man, that you would want for a museum collection.
Yeah, true. And but I'm going to throw it back to you, Rick, because when I was in grad school in the 90s, Barclay's work, you could not find it. Unless you lived in Philadelphia, right, and you're at the Philadelphia Museum of Art or the Pennsylvania Academy of Fine Arts or the Studio Museum in Harlem, you were not seeing his work, period. It was in the National Gallery, but it had been in storage for 20 years. And I first saw his work in two books. One, Thelma Golden's wonderful exhibition, Blackmail, from 94, I believe. And then your Black Art book, 97. And so that was my introduction. I fell in love with Barclay Hendricks, and that's why the show happened here. But it was because of you helping introduce me to the work and then making that possible. But there's a lot of stories like that. Like the Nina Chanel Abney show that Marshall Price curated was her first solo show in a museum. Now she's a household name. We've done a lot of that, and it's a privilege to be able to do that work. It's an honor to be able to do that work. I'm curious, Rick, how you would define, if we would say, what is the Nasher known for? What would you say our identity is? Because that's not all we do, right?
I'm pulling out my thesaurus in my head, and I'm trying to figure out those words. I would say fresh. I like that word fresh because you come here and you're delightfully surprised and exhilarated by what you see. We were talking, and some of the things are things that you think you've seen for a long time. For example, if you go into the gallery to my left, and you go to that towards the end, there's a Mark Hewitt. Mark Hewitt is an institutional figure of ceramics here in North Carolina. But the way, the piece that has been acquired, the way it's installed, you see it anew. And you realize, wow, the Nasher has this uncanny way of presenting that which is familiar in a way that's quite fresh and delightful to see. Fresh.
Oh, we'll take that. Fresh and so clean. I don't know where to take that, Rick. After that's a closing note. No, we're not closing. I definitely want to talk to you more about also the role of faculty in general and students here. And a big part of what we do every day is teach here. Our curators teach classes themselves. You and Christine and many others teach classes in the building. Our team actually makes the works available not only in the galleries, but in storage. And storage is used as for study almost every day of the week. So what I'm getting at is not just the engagement with faculty and students, but the appeal that has to, I mentioned our generous donors before. The fact that when works come into the collection, it's not thinking about, oh gosh, when is it going to go on view? It's that it's used continuously. And it requires faculty to have, to actually bring the classes here and facilitate that type of engagement.
I think part of the reason why what you've described works is that our faculty understand the value of making and the value of objects. And while we have expanded ourselves to think in much more theoretical ways, much more digital ways of how images can be engaged with and experienced, I don't think any of us have lost sight of the power of standing in front of an object, of walking around an object, of if you're able to put on some of those white gloves and to be able to manipulate it and move it around. And we've been very lucky in our time here to have this experience. What you're also hearing is something that I've just recently done because I'm doing an African art class this semester, and we've been very fortunate. And thanks to the Nasher staff, we've been able to look up close at an object that's been in storage for a very, very long time. But it's a very, very powerful and important piece of Yoruba art. And so I'm hoping that we can impart to students the power of the object, in a moment when they think they see objects, when they have that little camera on their phone, or they think they see an object when they are virtually engaging with it. And you have to say, no, that's not the object. The object is something that exists in the world, and it was created by somebody with their hands. And you need to experience it, and you need to see it, and the way you see it will be the way no one else will see it. No one else is going to see it the way you see it. And if you can empower students to have that experience, I've earned my keep.
Yeah, and what each viewer brings to the work adds new meaning to the work, right, in and of itself. I also want to talk a little bit about just what it means to bring artists to Duke, to bring artists to the Nasher and bring them to Durham. I mean, a lot of artists you see, it's just a small selection, but it's something we're very proud of. We have such an extensive network, with our team over the years. And when I say our team, I'm including our board, our faculty, colleagues, everyone, in bringing artists in. And the reason I want to bring it up is not, okay, it was wonderful to have artists here and hear them speak. But there's an engagement, a level of engagement you can have here that you don't have when you're in New York or you're in Los Angeles. You can, a level of interactivity. Sometimes it's built in a form of a small residency, but sometimes it's just super informal. Like Carrie Mae Weems is here, and she's just out there talking to everybody. We sit down, we're going to have a glass of wine, and you've been involved in so much of that. And
I think I fell in love so much with Nina Chanel Abney's work because of Marshall inviting her to experience and witness her own show here. And I was lucky enough to bring her to my class. And she recounted her years growing up in the south suburbs of Chicago, which I knew very well, and just how she evolves and becomes, this really brilliant voice of the 20 teens. Some of you might know that when she emerges in 2013, 2014, she's doing these incredible abstract works that also address police violence and urban unrest, but doing it in a way that is, on one hand, recognizable, but on the other hand, moves way beyond the pedestrian photojournalistic and into something that is much more haptic in terms of color and light and juxtaposition of form. And so having her in a class and having her engage with my students was just one of the best experiences that I've had.
Yeah, it's I think it's something that, especially as the museum was starting in the very early days, there was even more, it felt like a real startup. And we were kind of flying by the seat of our pants in many ways. And to be able to bring in artists and commission new works with them, to sort of give them the opportunity to spread their wings and do new things, is super gratifying for any curator, for any museum. But also the experience that they get in actually working with students is not to be overlooked or understressed. And that's something we're going to obviously continue doing. But
I was just going to add that all of this is done on a very tight budget. All of this is done with university subsidies and the support of members and the board. But it's still not a lot of money. It's hard to kind of make ends meet. Frankly, I know that as the nature of cultural institutions, that's their reality. But the Nasher has always managed to do so much with so little, and I think part of it has to do with the goodwill that when artists come here and when they engage with the staff and when they engage with faculty and students. They know that this is a special experience. It's not, that kind of, more bureaucratic thing. And so I'm thinking about when Ebony Patterson, in the midst of COVID, when hardly anybody's around, she comes in and does this extraordinary installation that takes up a good part of the museum, and still manages to interact and reach out and engage with people.
Yeah, that was a real bittersweet moment. Ebony G. Patterson, a remarkable Jamaican-born artist, who we took the show from the Perez Art Museum, Miami, but it's not a package deal. It's not like we hang works on wall. Anyone who saw it, it actually was transforming the gallery into a night garden. So we flew down a florist from New York, and she was here working with our team, and we had extra installers and turned the entire gallery into this amazing, luscious space. It's open for like 10 days, and then COVID hits, and it's closed. But the Duke students got to enjoy it. We still taught classes in there with, some safe distancing, and that was great. But like that is definitely one of those moments where like maybe, maybe we need to revisit that with Ebony in some way down the line. Before I want to go to Q&A a few minutes, but I want to just also ask you, Rick, just looking ahead, one thing we were talking about bringing artists to town. We have obviously the sculpture garden that's transforming the landscape around us. Like that's something really important that's happening right now, and that's going to open up all new opportunities to bring in artists and have them respond to the natural landscape, to the history of Durham, to the history of Duke, and explore things here. Do you have any aspirations when you think about that possibility, Rick?
Well, this also underscores the Nasher's cutting edge quality, because so many institutions now are doing these outdoor spaces. I'm in communication with folks at the Hirshhorn Museum and Sculpture Garden, and they've been working for the last couple of years on a major redesign of their outdoor, sculpture garden. And of course, Princeton is coming into its own right now with a whole new facility. So I'm impressed with how there was this vision some years ago. Really, Sarah Stroth, in many respects, was the machine behind working with Nancy Nasher to really try to make this come into fruition. And then when you came on board, dealing with the nuts and bolts of land moving and platforms and thinking about where objects are going to go, this is going to be really important. Particularly in relationship to the Sarah B. Duke Garden. So we're going to have this destination of indoor-outdoor art and nature experience, which is going to be really important, and I think an opportunity education-wise to help people think about art in public spaces, particularly at a moment when there is so much anxiety about, the public sphere. And so I have no doubt that the Nasher will be, there to kind of help people and learn and educate people about, public art and contemporary art.
Yeah. Our curators definitely have some things in mind, some exciting proposals, but we're equally excited just about the fact that we have ADA accessible pathways coming up from the parking lot. The fact that we're putting in native plantings and removing invasives. The fact that we're creating a green space for Durham for more community to gather, for students to come and study, to have performance, to work with our new Vice Provost for the Arts, Deborah Rutter, and have music and film. And so that whole world is opening up. Thank you to Sarah Schroth, as you mentioned, for having this vision and for Duke to embracing it. It's probably a good note for us to wind down on. So we're take a little time for Q&A, right, Deanna? Yes. Okay, all right. Thank you, Rick.
Thank you.
Michael with a hardball question.
Thank you. So higher education, journalism, literature, the arts, books being banned, it's all under attack, and someone could suggest, I would, that art museums are almost the center of all of those things, right? Literature, art, intellectualism, higher education. How does what we're going through color your thinking about running an academic art museum?
It's a great question. It's certainly something we talk about as a team a lot and address, but it hasn't. If anything, it just gives us more resolve. It makes us feel like our mission is even more critical than it was, let's say, last December or early November. I think we're wedded to what we do, and we're a place where we can raise questions. We can tell stories that maybe others are trying to erase those histories, and we can keep them alive through exhibitions, through artworks, the stories that the artists are telling, that the curators are telling, scholars and students. That's important, that storytelling capacity and the space for dialogue, but also the space for community to come together. I mean, everybody in this room and beyond, and have a space where people feel like it's a safe space for intellectual exchange, first and foremost. Yeah. I know, Rick, you want to add anything?
Thank you, Trevor. I was just thinking that I'm an art historian, and so I know history, and I know that this is not new. I know that there have been moments in the past, in the historical past, when things have been, if not probably crazier and more restrictive and more scary. And I'm also thinking about the communities that I've been connected to. Before Yale, I was at Morehouse College, and then after that, I was at Howard University. I've got two amazing historically black colleges that found a way out of no way, that were able to do things, extraordinary things, support students, speak truth to power, when federal monies weren't even there. You just had to, you worked with what you had. You sent those messages on a ground level to students and to fellow faculty. So there have been times before that have been really, really crazy, and people have survived and even thrived even under those circumstances. So we should just remember that we can get through this, particularly if we hold to values like education, like truth, like free speech, like the power of art to say things and explore things that even, and people pick up that, oh wow, this is like art will really pull me out, call me out, and so we just got to keep on doing that.
Yes.
this is more of a comment, but I can remember a long while ago going to see a show about Bela Kuti and being in the show thinking, this is Rick. And then Rick comes to me many years, well, not many years later, but at the same time, and we do a show called Shades of Black. And those together, you talk about freshness, it's a continuing freshness from that period before we had the museum. When you were in another person's museum and we were in the basement of the Franklin Center. So it's nice to see this all continue on and be replicated. I feel like every show I come to at the Nasher, it's new, but I feel like I know its roots because of what you two have accomplished in that time.
Thank you so much. What you said just reminded me of the Nasher and its international, connections, and yes, in the 90s, kind of at the height of kind of cultural studies, we were lucky enough to have people like Stuart Hall here, and we had Sonia Boyce in residence at Duke, who later on goes on to represent the UK in the Venice Biennale. One of the other artists who came in that time period was artist curator David Bailey, a close colleague of Trevor's, who's on the cutting edge of really exploring the Black British art scene. And as you remind us, Rob, the 90s was kind of that heyday of kind of global, the celebration of the world and how we can all be in conversation with one another. And a lot of that has been attacked and pilloried. But I think it's important for us to maintain our connections with the world because we have friends in the world. I'm thinking of John Onkomfra and his incredible installation that you were very involved with. And so we've always had these good conversations with the world, and I hope that continues.
It will. Yeah, our curators are on top of that for sure.
It's hard to do, let's face it now, with the challenges with international anything.
Yeah, I think it all comes down to relationships and building those relationships and maintaining them and building trust. So your ability to work with an artist as a curator is built on the trust that you built with them over time. And as an institution, artists have faith in the institution, and donors have faith in the institution, and the public has faith in the institution because of the work that the team has done collectively in building that trust.
This has been a fascinating conversation, and thank you so much, both of you. I am wondering, in terms of your board has been so essential in the past 20 years. I don't know how your board is selected, and I'm wondering if there is any attention being given to the way in which the other state institutions in this area are being so restricted, and their boards are really essentially selected by the legislature, which is very conservative. So is there any way to talk about partnering, even though there's a great rivalry, between, say, UNC and Duke with respect to the kind of art that might not be possible at some of the state institutions because of the boards? And when you're selecting persons from the board, do you include persons who, although they may not have great resources, have relationships to the wider community? And by wider, I mean all of Durham, but also, for example, the diaspora.
Excellent question. Thank you for asking. First and foremost, in building the board, it's the here. Yes, we have a tremendous luxury in not having that pressure and that imposition that our colleagues do at UNC, at the NCMA, from the state legislature and imposing a little more control than perhaps they should be. And so it is the discretion of the director in conversation with their team here to make those calls, but then you run it by the president's office based on whether they are a Duke alumna or alumnus, and whether they may be being pursued for some other gift or project at Duke. But we have a lot of leeway and luxury, and we have multiple boards. This is our National Board of Advisors that I'm addressing right now, which is not a fiduciary board, it's not a governing board, it's a board of advisors like all the boards across Duke except for the trustees, which really govern the entire university. So we're part of that 501c3 structure. We have brought in we have colleagues, I can mention, so Andrea Barnwell-Brownlee is a former student of Rick's, got her PhD with Rick here at Duke, was the director of the Spelman College Museum and the director of the Cummer Museum, and she's on our board. And that's not because of her giving potential, it's to have a colleague who has experience somewhere else, is going through similar issues and can give great advice. Or Odili Danododita, whose mural you see out in front of the lecture hall as we walk in, is on our board. He's an artist based in Philadelphia. He teaches at Tyler, so he understands working within a university context. He's has a massive installation in MoMA when you go in right now. So, born in Enugu, Nigeria, grew up in Ohio, lives in Philadelphia and New York. So diaspora. Or an artist like Dario Robledo, who's been a great colleague and partner with the museum, who's from Texas, lives and works there, but is an amazing conceptual artist and spends most of his time now not in conversation with museums and even curators, but with scientists. Like he's on panels with Carl Sagan or heart surgeons, and bringing the perspective of an artist into those conversations where they don't normally get to have a voice, and then bringing that back to the museum. So we're super fortunate that we don't have to deal with those things. We do collaborate with our peers. We're very collegial. Yes, there's a strong Duke-UNC rivalry on the basketball court and the football field and beyond, but we're great colleagues. We actually have works that we own together. We have organized shows together. It's difficult doing those things. We've done programming together. We even have a marketing campaign together right now in this moment. The NCMA, their director, Valerie Hillings, is a Duke graduate, so we have a great relationship with her. But it's hard to figure out exactly how to support one another other than be there and pick up the phone when they need advice or I need advice or what have you.
I was just going to add that when I first got here, before the Nasher Museum of Art, it was the Duke University Museum of Art, and I was lucky enough to bring an exhibit that I had done at the Washington Project for the Arts called The Blues Aesthetic, Black Culture and Modernism. And one of the partners and friends of making that show happen was North Carolina Central University Art Museum. And then some years after that, at the end of the 1990s, I organized another exhibit called To Conserve a Legacy, American Art at Historically Black Colleges and Universities. And that was an exhibition and a team project that we did with 6 historically black colleges and universities, including North Carolina Central University, which has an extraordinary, small, but some exceptional pieces in their collection. And I also have to say that when I first got here, one of the first people who reached out to me was Norman Pendergraph, who was the director of the North Carolina Central University Museum before people at Duke knew I was here. So I would have to say that I always have to remind myself, I don't have to remind myself, I just know that I'm a Durhamite. as well as a Duke person, as well. I mean, in other words, I claim this community as my own, and I want to see it thrive, and I want to see it engage with the arts in as many ways as it can.
Thank you, Rick. I'll add to that, and then we're going to close because I know we're out of time. But also, Kenny Rogers, when he was director there, we had a great relationship with, and did a lot of programs with over the years. Just want to thank you, Rick, for the conversation tonight. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Gianna, the galleries are still open?
They are.
They are. Okay, the galleries are still open for an hour. There's going to be a reception if you need a drink after that. Enjoy yourselves. And just remember, October 18th, for those of you who live here, we're having our big celebration, our 20-year anniversary and Sculpture Garden opening. Thank you very much.